angels, it's Hailey Reese and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so beyond grateful that you are here and I really do hope that you are having an absolutely incredible morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is one that I am so excited to get into because we are once again exploring the world of haunted hospitals, specifically some of the most chilling, terrifying, and just outright unbelievable haunted hospital experiences that are said to be true by those working there who experienced it firsthand. Nurses are trained for the unexpected, from new life to healing the sick and being there during people's final moments. It's safe to say that they've seen it all. But what happens when those trained in science, logic, and care come face to face with the unexplainable? Hospitals are supposed to save lives, but what happens when the ones they couldn't save seem to be the ones still holding on? Today, we're diving into the top 8 true haunted hospital stories, as told by the nurses who couldn't forget them if they tried. These experiences are absolutely chilling, so sit back, relax, maybe turn a light on, and let's get into these terrifying experiences. This first experience is titled, "My Mommy Needs Me." It was just after 2 a.m. and I was halfway through my night shift. Room 207 had been on my mind all night. It was a woman in her late 30s with advanced complications from a rare autoimmune condition. She'd been declining steadily. Her husband had been visiting earlier in the day, but he'd left before midnight. She'd been quiet ever since. No visitors, no one in or out. At around 2:15, I passed her room and saw the door slightly open. As I walked past, I saw a little girl stepping out of the room barefoot, wearing a pale pink dress. I stopped. I asked where she'd came from as I was confused. She looked up at me with the calmest expression I've ever seen. No fear, just softness. And then she said, "My mommy needs me now." Before I could respond, she turned the corner. I followed immediately, but the hallway was empty. No exit, no unlocked doors, just silence. I rushed back into room 207 and the patient was still. Later that night, the patient would pass away. That morning, her husband returned to collect her things. He was heartbroken but calm. He held in hand a photo, and I must have gone pale when I'd seen it. He surely noticed I was staring and said quietly, "That's our daughter. She passed away 6 years ago. I like to think they're together now." I didn't say a word, but I'd seen her, so I know they are. Whenever I think of this story, my whole body gets chills. It's an experience I could never even try to make sense of. That gives me the chills every single time I read it. Can you imagine seeing a child there, the child telling you that their mommy needs them, and then finding out that it was their child that had passed away years before? So eerie. This one is called "The Patient That Wasn't Assigned." I was a new nurse on a med-surg floor, still learning the ropes. One night, it was late, and I saw a patient in room 228 get up and out of bed and begin slowly walking down the hall, holding on to his IV pole. He was pale, bald, probably in his 60s. I smiled at him and said, "Hey, you okay?" He nodded, didn't speak, and turned the corner toward the staff lounge. A few minutes later, I checked the chart. Room 228 was empty. No patient assigned. I asked the charge nurse, and she frowned and said, "That room's been closed since the flood. Haven't had anyone in there for weeks." I checked anyway, and the lights were off, bed was stripped. Even stranger, there was no patient that matched the description of the one I'd seen. I've heard so many experiences like this where nurses or doctors will claim that they saw a patient either in a room, leaving a room, or saying that they were coming from a room that was an empty room and the patient never existed. It's really eerie the amount of experiences that nurses and doctors have had with this. This next one's called The Woman in the Window. I was working psych nights at an older facility. Most of the patients were sedated or asleep by midnight. I was checking on a particularly fragile patient. She'd been having hallucinations and continuously was saying that a woman was watching her. That night, I stepped into her room and I found her sitting up in bed, staring toward the window, with a look on her face I can't even explain. "She's back," she whispered. "Don't you see her?" I looked. At first, I really did see nothing, just as expected. But then, suddenly like a horror movie, outside there was a woman's face pressed to the glass. It was pale, unmoving, and her eyes were too wide. Her smile, also too wide, felt wrong. We were on the 3rd floor. I ran out down the hallway toward the window outside, but there was nothing. No ladder, no ledge. Sounds nuts, but I know what I saw. Can you imagine being that high up and knowing that there was just no possible way for a human's face to be pressed against the window, and yet you know that you saw it and you weren't the only one who saw it? Oof, that's so creepy. This next experience is called Your Mom is Here. I've been a nurse for over 12 years, and if I'm honest, I never really believed in anything after death. No ghosts and no heaven, just silence. The idea freaked me out, but I tried not to think about it. That belief was pretty solid though, until one night that changed everything. I was working the night shift in palliative care. It's a quiet unit, the kind you grow used to the rhythm of last breaths. I was assigned to a new patient, an older man in his 70s. He had end-stage cancer and was unresponsive to treatment. He also had no listed family. I sat with him for a while, charting, when he opened his eyes and said, "I'm scared. I don't want to die alone." I squeezed his hand and said I'd be there, but he shook his head slowly. "I mean, there's no one waiting for me. No one on the other side." I didn't know what to say. I'd always struggled with deathbed comfort, especially when it turned spiritual. But for some reason, I stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall, and whispered, "Mom, if you're out there, can you just be there for him?" My mom had died 4 years ago, quietly. Cancer too. I'd never felt her since, never had a sign, and I really didn't expect one now. I went back into the room, and about 20 minutes later, his breathing changed. You know the sound, that slow and shallow fade. Then suddenly, he opened his eyes, clear and calm. He looked past me toward the corner of the room, and with the faintest smile, he whispered, "She's here." I blinked. "Who?" I asked. He didn't look at me, but I heard under his breath, "Your mom. She's here." Not long after, he was gone, peacefully. I sat there in stunned silence. There was no draft, no flickering lights, no voices or chills, but just a warmth, a quiet presence like I wasn't alone either. And for the first time in my career, I was no longer afraid of death. Okay, first of all, that one is so beautiful in so many different ways. Can you just imagine the reassurance you would feel knowing, as somebody who's never even believed in that, but holding on to the faith that if there is life after death, you and your family can provide some sort of comfort, and to get that kind of response through it. I can't even imagine how beautiful that must have been for them. I honestly have goosebumps. This one's called They Always Look Behind You. Hospice can be peaceful, but it's not always quiet. One of our patients, a retired firefighter, kept asking about the people who stood at the foot of his bed. He wasn't confused. He was sharp. They don't talk, he told me. They just wait, but they're getting closer. If you look behind you, you'll know. The last night I saw him, he smiled and looked over my shoulder once again and said, "There's another one now, right behind you." I turned and there was nothing, but that night he coded. Weirdly enough, as I called it, the hallway lights flickered. Then when I walked out, one of the motion sensors in the visiting area triggered, but there was no one in the room. This one's interesting because it makes me wonder who the people were that he was seeing. Were they people that were exclusive to him, perhaps those waiting for him on the other side, or could they even be spirits that are there for those passing in the hospital? I'd love to know what you guys think of that. This one's called "She Wants to Hold the Baby." Years ago, I worked postpartum. There was one room that new moms always asked to be moved out of one way or another, but I never really knew the exact reason why. One night, though, a patient rang and was all panicked. She said an older woman had entered her room and stood over her baby, whispering, "She's beautiful." Just for a moment. The mother thought she was a confused visitor, not knowing what she meant, when the woman says, "Please, I lost mine." Nobody had come through the doors and our unit was locked 24/7. I checked the cameras and you can't see the woman. When I brought it up to the other nurses, they said it's always been the same story. The women always want to leave that room because a sad woman who lost their baby won't leave them alone. That's sad. And that's eerie. That's eerie and sad all in one, honestly. The idea that there's a spirit who may have lost their baby that's stuck or feeling trapped within the hospital and tries to find some sort of hope in the delivery of living babies absolutely breaks my heart. But beyond that, can you imagine being a mother who's just given birth, who may be on a bunch of meds, waking up and realizing that there's someone in there that desires your baby and you have no idea who they are, especially to later find out they didn't even exist? It's so creepy, but like I said, also really sad. This one's titled, "I'm So Sorry." I was working a night shift in the trauma unit when they brought her in. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, unconscious from a car accident. She was badly injured. Head trauma, internal bleeding. We stabilized her, but she was critical. A few hours into the shift, I stepped into her room to check vitals and saw a man already there standing quietly beside her bed. He looked to be in his 30s, pale and shaken. His clothes were messy, like he'd been in the rain. I didn't recognize him as family that I'd met, but he wasn't touching anything, just standing there and staring at her in a way like his heart was breaking. I gently asked, "Are you related?" He didn't look at me, he just whispered, "I'm so sorry." Then he turned and walked out of the room. I followed him into the hall, but he was gone. I checked the visitor log, and no one had signed in. No one had been cleared to visit her. In the morning, I read when I saw about the accident online. There were 2 cars involved. The driver of the other vehicle had died at the scene. His name, age, and photo. It was the man I saw, the one who stood by her bed, the one who said, "I'm so sorry." That one genuinely sends chills through my entire body. I can't even believe that. I can't even believe how the nurse must have felt when they made the connection that it was the man that had been in the girl's room. I need to know what you guys think of that one, because truly so far, that might be my favorite. That one freaks me out, but in a way, it's also so compassionate knowing that the spirit went to check on the girl that he'd hurt. Crazy. And this last one is titled, "The Girl in the Hallway." It was my 3rd week working the night shift at the old hospital. It was really late and I was walking down the long, empty hallway when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8. She was standing by the nurse's station, staring at me with these wide, darkened eyes. I stopped in my tracks. She was in a faded hospital gown, her dark hair hanging in loose tangles. I asked her if she was lost, but she didn't answer. Instead, she took a small step forward, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "Come play with me." Confused, I asked where her parents were. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned and walked quickly down the hall. I followed her into the room that she ran into, but when I stepped inside, there was no one there. The room was empty, as if it had never ever been disturbed. I checked the bed, vacant. The monitors, off. No sign of any recent patients, just an ordinary, untouched room. Confused and a little shaken, I left the room and looked down the hall, but the little girl I'd seen was gone. The next morning, I asked the other nurses if they'd seen her, and nobody had. But when I spoke to one of the senior nurses later in the shift, she said that wing of the hospital had been haunted by her for years. I used to think that the ghost stories that circulated were all made up to scare the new staff, but now I know better. Well, you guys, those are 8 of the most terrifying, chilling, and unbelievable true haunted hospital stories as told by nurses. What do you guys think of these experiences, and which one freaked you out the most? I would love to know all of your thoughts and opinions or theories down below. I actually had a really crazy scare that I shared with you guys years ago when I was admitted to the hospital, so I very much know just how haunted hospitals can be, but I want to hear from you. Have you ever had an experience? And if you experienced any of these things, what would you do? If you guys are new to my channel, or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my content, I would really appreciate it more than you would ever know if you could go ahead and click that subscribe button, or just check into my channel every single day, as I'm uploading a new video every single day, so there will be something new for you to enjoy should you want to do so. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until tomorrow, I love you guys. Bye, guys.